afternoon. Today is obviously one of the most difficult days in the history of the city and the country. And I'd ask the people of New York City to do everything that they can to cooperate, not to be frightened, to go about their lives as normal. Everything is safe right now in the city. And I want the people of New York to be an example to the rest of the country and the rest of the world that terrorism can't stop us.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
In the row house next to where I live in Brooklyn, the sign in the window is the front page from the Daily News. I heart New York more than ever. And I cringe, because I'm one of those people leaving. The morning after Osama bin Laden died, I was sitting on the steps in front of my house thinking about the sky. Maybe you've heard Montana is big sky country. Well, it is. But so was New York that day. We all remember. The sky on September 11th, it was impossibly blue. So blue it made your eyes hurt. It was blue, blue, blue. When the towers fell and I was on the Brooklyn Bridge, which I walked across almost every day and thought of as the place I loved most in this world. 10 years ago, I felt so stuck. I wanted to be one of those journalists who race to put away personal fears and just go, do, report. But all I could do was walk around and look at people and wonder silently, hey, did you know anyone in the towers? Or, hey, are you scared? Because I am. I was. Scared to be around any tall buildings. Scared to stay in New York. Brooklyn Bridge or no Brooklyn Bridge. I started realizing what it meant to be a transplant, not a true New Yorker, and I wanted out. I had this overwhelming sense I wanted a life less nuts. Not just because of the attacks, but because of the rent. Mine was about to be doubled. And the infrequent F train, and hauling my laundry, and all the rude dudes in the deli. All of the annoying stuff about living in New York you don't realize until you live there. The weekend after 9/11, I had this wedding to go to in Erie, which meant home to me because it's where I went to college and where I worked as a reporter at the local paper before coming to NYC to get a graduate degree. At the reception, looking around at all these people whose stories I knew, I belonged in a way I just didn't in New York. At the time, I was 28, and it was just me and my cat. No romance, no really close family. And after being on the bridge and watching something so much bigger than me go up in smoke, I just wanted to be connected to something, to commit to something. So I decided my family was Erie. Within 2 weeks of that wedding, I was packed. I got hired again at the Erie Times-News, this time as the night cop reporter. And suddenly I was settled. But I did miss New York, and I did feel shaken. I'd walk to one of the few places you could buy a New York Times and just spend days poring over the portraits of grief, those small flashes of the lives of people lost on 9/11. I forced myself to read them, even though they made me incredibly sad. I just felt so inadequate. They had so much to live for, it seemed, and I up and left because it felt good. I wrote a few columns about being on the bridge during the attacks, but it was weird. In Erie, it was just TV, but the TV then was still pretty full of it. I'd see the flaming towers on the screens in the newsroom and just sit quietly at my desk and cry. After almost 3 years working night cops, I met a guy who made me laugh and seemed perfect, except that he lived in D.C. So I moved again to another big city, which is something I never thought I'd do. We got married and went on vacation to Montana, where we picked up a pretty typical story. People fall in love with this place and then they move here. We bought our first place, a big yellow farmhouse with a porch in the middle of Missoula, where my daughter was born in 2009. So now I guess I have the connections I was searching for 10 years ago. I thought I'd find them in Erie, but I didn't, and now this is home. But I still miss those other places I've lived. Among the first things we hung up in our house were some old photos of the Brooklyn Bridge. I think I do heart the bridge more than ever. And sometimes I find myself scrolling through images of it, nostalgic for my former commute and my former city. I don't talk about it much. I think about it sometimes. I cried in the shower once, remembering. Now in the way out west, I just feel a sort of kinship with anyone I meet who lived in New York or who just loves it for some reason. I love it from afar now, like a movie watcher. And that's okay with me. Someday I think I really would like to take my daughter for a walk across the bridge. If that time ever comes, I hope she gets it. I hope I can tell her what it was like to briefly be a New Yorker. Even though 10 years ago on that September day, when everything seemed to grind to a halt, her mom bailed. And life, as it turns out, went on.